Welcome to our fabulous panel. I have been trying to figure out how to be less museum-y and more fashion-y. So I'm going to start with a quote from Cheryl Donegan, which seems to be my favorite way of speaking lately. When Jasper Johns said, "Take something, do something to it, do something else to it," he might not have meant cut jeans into shorts. Cheryl Donegan. The rest of the panel we have described as art and fashion have, of course, long crossed paths, and their intersections continue to draw out the art world's uneasy relationship, not that uneasy, let's be honest, to market culture and to the market's overt commodification of art objects. Exploring recent collaborations and collisions between art and fashion, this panel of artists, designers, and writers will consider how online shopping, social media, performance, and legacies of craft have allowed them to push such boundaries, playing openly between the poles of outlandish luxury and debased realism. So I think we're in for a great night of discussion. I'm, by the way, Johanna Burton. I'm the Director and Curator of Education and Public Engagement here at the New Museum. And this is the first, it's actually supposed to be the second of our public programs around Cheryl and her show, but the first one has been rescheduled. It happened during the great snowstorm of 2016. And I will tell you about the other programs that are coming up, although I actually didn't print them out, so maybe Sarah will. I printed out the wrong document. Sorry, Sarah. I should have mentioned along these lines that my two great collaborators on this project have been Sarah O'Keefe and Alicia Ritson, and the most important collaborator, of course, Cheryl Donegan, who's sitting there in the red sweater. This particular residency marks a really special one for us in that Cheryl not only came and worked, as many of our past residents have, with us really closely in the department, but it is also a kind of mini survey of her work from over the last almost 30 years, the first of its kind, the first in New York or really anywhere in the States or in the world, anywhere. And so we feel really proud of that accomplishment, both for Cheryl and for the New Museum as well. We thought about Cheryl as a great artist in residence for this particular thematic, which is legacy. So thinking about histories, how they're written, how they're disrupted, how they're produced, and how we can go back to certain elements within them. And so this panel, in a way, I think also takes that up in really significant ways. Sarah and Ali are going to read bios for the participants. We're so excited about all of the participants today. And also, prior to public programs, we like to, as a group, both internally in the department and with our artists in residence, come up with some questions that we send in advance, and we're going to share those with you as well. So with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Cheryl so she can explain the thinking behind this panel a little bit more, and then we'll get off to the races with it. The way that we're going to do it is each panelist will speak for about 10 minutes about their own work and their relationship to these questions. We'll have a conversation, and then we'll open it up to you guys. So Cheryl?
Do I have to stand? I can't. Okay. Can I sit here? Would that be more comfortable for me? Yes, it would. Okay. I think I recall very well sitting at a dinner table at the Skowhegan when I was faculty there in 2011, and confessing to my friends at the table, I think I want to start a fashion blog, and basically asking all their permission if I could start a fashion blog, because I felt too embarrassed or something. I thought, oh, no one will take me seriously as an artist, or what a serious artist, which I obviously fancied myself because I've mentioned it twice. Would that person do a fashion blog? And of course, everyone at the table at Skowhegan said, just do it, Cheryl. And so I started Your Plastic Bag, and it was really important to me when I made my fashion blog to put this little tagline on it, I'm not a fashion person and neither are you, which I thought could sound sort of hostile and defensive, but I thought, no, it's actually really specific, because I wanted to sort of portray that I myself wasn't in the industry. I didn't know a particular great deal about how things were made or how they were marketed or how to design things. I just knew that from the time I can remember, literally sitting in church, not listening and thinking about outfits I could put together. That's how I spent every Sunday morning, frankly, of my childhood. So thinking about clothes. So to make the fashion blog your plastic bag was, really like a way that the simplicity of the internet really allowed me to do an artwork that I'd sort of always wanted to do. And and I think if I can look back at even the years since I've done it, it kind of almost introduced and erupted a whole new kind of creative period in my work. And I think a lot of the work that's in the show, if you date it back from 2011 when I started Your Plastic Bag, I think there's been a real shift in embracing a lot of different ways of making things. Collaborating with Print All Over Me, collaborating with other, digital ways of making fashion, using fabric in my work more prominently, stuff like that. And so when I thought about the panel, I thought I also wanted to have other people who I could say are not fashion people either, but are very much, and use it to explore different ways that style and clothing and fabric can be portrayed in work, not just the typical relationship of art and fashion where a designer might say, oh, I was so influenced by the Rothko paintings and that's why I made these gowns, or say, other more typical ways that art and fashion are introduced or kept apart, by artists like I was who said, oh, it's not serious. No, I feel completely differently. So anyways, that's the components of the panel. I think when you see all the artists, hopefully you'll understand what I mean. And I think my introduction is over. Thanks.
Oh, great. Okay. As Johanna mentioned, we had some questions that we shared with the panelists beforehand, and we kind of offered the directive or offered these up to be engaged with in any way, not necessarily that the panelists have to answer these questions, but just so that we could all come together, having pre-thought of some common themes, common ideas. So to start off with, we had, how does fashion figure in your practice? How did you come to fashion? How would you describe your personal style? Please respond to the following word prompts: refashion, performance, surface, costume. Trends and value are overtly embraced in the fashion industry, but viewed with some suspicion in art and publishing. How do collisions between fashion and other fields, art, publishing, and beyond, challenge the value systems ingrained in each? How has the internet, particularly social media, affected how fashion trends circulate and how value is assigned? And how has fashion responded in turn? What is the role of memory in relation to fashion? How might the idea of collection play into this, both in terms of fashion collections or a process of gleaning ideas and inspirations? What are the political potentials or pitfalls of fashion and refashioning? And the final one was, given obsolescence and recycling are built into the structure of the fashion industry, is the idea of a constantly evolving self central to the industry's success? Okay, and I'll hand over to Sarah now for the bios.
Hi, everyone. I'm an assistant curator here at the museum, and I'm just going to read the bios based on the order in which people are speaking. And I just want to reiterate what everyone's been saying, but we're just so thrilled to have everyone here. We've admired their work for some time, and I know with Cheryl, too, we've been talking about them. So we're really excited about tonight. Okay, so first we have Mary Ping. Mary Ping launched her eponymous line of designer ready-to-wear in 2002, and a year later started Slow and Steady Wins the Race, a label known for its sartorial wit, comprised of collections based on categories, concepts, and classics, and rooted in modern cultural anthropology. Ping studied art at Vassar. Second, we'll have Antonio Blair. Antonio Blair is an artist and musician based in New York. Blair founded House of Ladoja in 2007, a collective exploration of the house philosophy popularized by ballroom culture. As a group of like-minded artists, they explore conceptual and social constructs and relate them via their individual ethnic, racial, sexual, and gender identities. House of Ladoja currently has an exhibition on view at the Bruce High Quality Foundation, which will be open until the end of the month. Eric Mack is an artist who lives and works in New York. His work has been exhibited widely, including at Greater New York, which you all can see at PS1 MoMA, Artists in Residence at the Studio Museum in Harlem, Pushing Painting Paradigms, curated by Latoya Ruby Frazier at the Mason Gross Galleries at Rutgers University. And his first solo exhibition, Never Had a Dream, was at Moran Bondaroff last fall. Mack is a graduate of the Yale MFA program. And finally, we have Emily Spivak, an artist, writer, and editor whose New York Times bestselling book, Worn Stories, a collection of stories about clothing and memory, was published in 2014. Emily culls stories about clothing from eBay posts for a website she curates called Sentimental Value, and created Threaded, the Smithsonian's clothing history blog. She recently launched howtodresslike.com, an online archive of nearly 1,000 step-by-step instructions culled from WikiHow. Emily has been featured in the New York Times, New York Magazine, NPR, and the Wall Street Journal. Okay, and so with that, I guess we'll hand it over first to Mary.
Okay. I'm just going to show some pictures and talk about them. Let's see if this works. All right. Full screen. Okay. So thank you to Cheryl first and foremost for this evening, for including me on this panel. Very honored to be with everyone included. So I'm just going to talk about Slow and Steady Wins the Race tonight in context with all the other topics that we're going to be addressing, and also with the body of work that's been most active recently. I started this line called Slow and Steady Wins the Race in 2002. It was right on the heels of a very traditional ready-to-wear line that had my name on it. But so I purposely wanted to kind of consolidate all these ideas I had while I was in college about sort of the system and the anthropology of how fashion exists. And so they all kind of live in this umbrella called Slow and Steady Wins the Race. And so I'm just going to show, there's a huge body of work at this point. It's like since 2002, and part of the main principle is that we keep everything that's been designed to kind of address that age-old question of well, you know, I had this and it was my favorite X, but they don't make it anymore, so what do I do? So we try to fight against that sort of like feeling. And so I'm just going to show as a kind of clear example of how we combine and dovetail the design, the concept, and then the final presentation into the overall sort of, I don't know how to package, that's a terrible word to say, but so this one was back in, and I'm only going to give the year just to give it a certain chronology, but we don't really operate that way. I like to think that while we're designing in the studio, everything has a goal of being timeless. That's like a big criteria for us. If it feels like it's not going to be relevant in 5 years or even 10 years, then it gets scrapped. Like it's not strong enough. So this one I did in 2009, and it was we introduced the idea of luxury. So the inception of the idea in the studio was about, well, you know, in fashion, there's always this right now, especially this obsession with luxury items. And so thought like, okay, well, let's start an introduction. Let's start a discussion with designs and objects, like talking about what luxury is. And so we showed it at the Carlisle. I'm just gonna explain the photos because they're probably the easiest. So this is a white pocket t-shirt, but it's all embroidered in pearls. And then there's so on the left is a traditional blazer. It's 100% cashmere from an Italian mill. It's hand constructed, but purposely with the seams on the outside, and then the seams are 100% silk, and they're bound 1/8 of an inch, which is the tiniest you can fit through a machine. And then the piece on the right is a 16-ply cashmere jumpsuit. And 16-ply is, to give a physical dimension, is about almost like 3/8 of an inch thick. And then the pants on the left, we actually researched cavalry pants, and these again were hand patterned, and then they are from a hammered silk from a mill in Lake Como in Italy that doesn't exist anymore. And then on the right is sort of the pullback view of everything. So what we did was I rented a suite for the reception. So during Fashion Week, the installation was everyone was invited to come to visit the suite as if they were going to a room at the Carlisle. And it was one of the master suites. And then we just kind of went in there the day before and literally took it over and like kind of flipped everything upside down. And then these are just sort of like the installation shots. So jumbo pearls, a faux fox stole, leather garments, all kind of displayed within the bathroom. On the left is, I think most people know this bag. It's a 4-sided, I'm not going to say the name because it's trademarked, and because I will get into trouble. But I think everyone can recognize what kind of bag it is. And so then the idea behind this was, well, there's this like, very recognizable gesture of women when they are very proud of carrying their status bag, but somehow it's always frontal. So then I kept thinking like, well, if you really want to talk about luxury, why not show it from every angle? So you're not worried about seeing it from just the front. You should see it from the side and from the back. And then there's the other faux fox. And then this is the side room, and we took over. So we have one collection called the white T-shirt, and it's the white pocket tee again, and it's reimagined in different fabrications, which actually automatically transforms like how the T-shirt is, just by the material. So then we updated it and we did it in black. And this is a collaboration with a sculptor and jewelry designer, Hannah Sandin, and she practices under the name Sama. And this was a little bit kismet because we kind of talked about this idea of what, based on her previous work and then what I wanted. And then it just turned out that it kind of looked like the interior of this grand piano. So we just put it in there. Yeah, I think that's 10 minutes. Maybe? Less? I'm gonna put a timer. More things to say.
Do you want to wait until discussion to ask
Yes.
questions? Because I could ask a lot of questions, but maybe, do you want to just hold off and wait till later?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, she wants to hold off.
Hi. My name is Antonio Blair, mother of the House of Ladoja. Yeah. Shout out to my sister Christina's in the building for moral support. I've never done anything like this before, so I'm kind of nervous, but yeah. Oh, wait. How do I? So that's me. Basically, the House of Ladoja started in about 2007, completely by accident because I was making music on my computer and I wanted to put it on MySpace, but I didn't know what to call it. And I had just discovered Paris is Burning, which is probably for sure my favorite movie of all time. And it just introduced me to a part of myself that I just really didn't think that I could access just through my human normal form. And I saw like all of these beautiful people who had so much support from their friends and from their community that the idea of a house just seemed so amazing to me. So we started a house, which was just basically all of just my friends from college. Um, I went to Parsons for fashion design actually, and they hated me because I have to. I come from Nashville, Tennessee, whereas like fashion in Nashville is like it doesn't matter who it is, where it's from, how much it costs, as long as it's brand new, and as long as it all matches and coordinates. So it doesn't matter if you're wearing a $400 outfit. If someone looked at it, they're like, "Girl, that's so tacky looking." Like, they would look at most high fashion things and be like, like, "Ew," like that looks weird. So growing up, all of my fashion icons were people like Lil Kim, uh, Missy Elliott, and like just 90s supermodels. So like, I always thought of that as like the ultimate fashion level that you could complete was to be Lil Kim. It looked like money, but it looked like me, like something that I could put together. So that's where my character of La Femme Ladoja came from, and that's the look. That's me performing at Westgate, and I had just come back from a mini tour in Australia, and I knew I couldn't come back like looking like I had looked before I left. So I had lost a little bit of weight, and I thought, let's just wear a fishnet bodysuit. Why not? And it's probably one of my like most prized moments that I've ever felt on stage. I felt like a true gangstress, and I felt like Naomi Campbell, and I just felt legit. This is me also trying to be a supermodel. Um, and the reason I say that is because I think that, like, for me being a little super feminine gay boy from the South, the idea that I could take a picture like that or like be any of that kind of a thing to me was just like so just unavailable, like I couldn't do it. So once I moved to New York, um, like even the bag that I'm carrying is a Sephora bag that I found on the streets, and I thought, what if I just carry the Sephora bag as my purse, even though I can't afford Sephora, but the idea of like the opulence of like taking this empty bag that I found and like carrying it around, and I would do that with like, I would find like Cartier bags and just like carry the Cartier shopping bag around the club all night, just like, it's cheap, but it looks really good. So we started a t-shirt company in about like 2011. And the whole idea behind the like t-shirt ranges was to like take popular culture references, but sort of how does that relate to all of us? And I have lots of friends who had started a journey through like a transition, or had lots of other friends who were like, whatever, like coming out as transgender or coming out as, you know, like whatever they felt on the inside. So we took the like the Ramones rage and we turned it into hormones, just for shock value, for like for to represent for those girls who were like actually popping out and like living their true selves. And plus we thought it looked like cool and people would see it and be like, whoa, yeah, I get that reference. This is us in Out 100 magazine. You can see this is like pretty much the whole house represented. And everyone has their own unique rage of like what they're giving or like what they want to give. And if you see in this photograph, I'm wearing the exact same outfit that I had on and when I came back from Australia, because, you know, although I didn't have any money, so I would just go and find things, or I would like be like, "Hey, girl, are you gonna be wearing that skirt tonight?" And she'd be like, "No, you can wear it tonight." Oh, cute. So like everything that I had when I first started performing, it was either like I can't afford to really go out and get a latex dress. What can I do instead? So I went to the fabric store, got like this really cheap like snakeskin looking like latex, and I made a dress really cheaply in probably like 30 minutes. The only thing is that during my performance, I completely destroyed it. So I only wore it the one time, but then I turned it into a crop top. Yeah. Um, this is another shirt that we did, the mother shirt. And I think probably the most beautiful woman to ever walk the planet is Naomi Campbell. She's like a gigantic inspiration to me personally. We think of her as a mother, and we call her Mother BMF, which is Black Model Famous, which is a song that I wrote where it was like, I think I'm Kate Moss, and I think I'm Naomi Campbell, which is like, I know I'm not those things, but I feel like it right now. In this moment, am I like, my wig and my borrowed clothes. Also, we love the idea of like really iconic fashion brands and making it our own. That's is our actual House of Ladoja emblem. I don't know, it's like Versace. That's me for style.com, and I'm wearing those overalls right now, which is a mistake. I realized it when I was sitting in the audience. I was like, oh shit. And that's the same fishnet bodysuit from all the other photographs, because I wanted to have a signature look of being like a Black Widow, and I love the texture of it all. Also, I love the idea of like being like this like um, French, this French Black woman who is at the party wearing a beret and just really carrying. And that's Rihanna wearing our Tupac shirt, which the way that that came out is because we were gonna do this pop-up fashion like store, and we were coming up with ideas, and we had images of Tupac, and we were like, oh, Tupac's tattoo is like his skin, like all of that looks, it's so iconic and it's so, you know, how can we take that and make it our own? So we came up with the Cunt Life shirt, and yeah, it came out pretty well. People seem to like it. Rihanna liked it. And then this is a funny story because that's my best friend Adam. We did a photo shoot where we just assumed that they would have clothing for us to wear at the photo shoot. And they were like, oh, no, like, y'all are fashion girls, right? You brought tons of clothing to wear. And we were like, no, we're poor. So we had to wear the clothes that we came in, but we were like, let's just flip it backwards. And, you know, and like really just blow their minds. So that's how that look came about. But it's honestly one of my favorite looks that I've ever done because it was like, let's do it, you know, like let's get her done. Also, I love denim. And I think that you can't really go wrong with like denim on denim on denim on denim. Also, this is probably the only time I've ever painted my fingernails because I just had a lot of time on the set. And then that's me wearing a Halloween costume that I found discarded, and I was like, it says so fucking hot. And that same fishnet bodysuit. I always feel kind of weird, like, because I work in nightlife as well, and I also know like a lot of people who, they know like a lot of like fashion designers, and they like buy new shit all the time, and they always have like really cute stuff, and I am just not that type of person. Never really cared about that because I've always thought like, ham to all of your really cute, expensive things, but like you can't really buy style. And I always felt like I was super stylish, just even if it was super cheap or even if I made it or even like whatever. I think it's all like individual, you know? And this was during my superhero phase where I was like, I don't really want to be a fashion model anymore because I don't really think that that represents what I want to do because it's a little too easy. And that's when I created being like La Femme Ladoja, which is just like me entering into my utmost like, I want to say cuntness, but like I don't know if that would offend anyone, but like it's my utmost self, like me like accepting like, well, this is what it is, and this is the outfit, and this is the look, and I know that the look is like, maybe there's a rip in the fishnet. It doesn't even matter because like it's not even about that. It's about like me expressing like this and like me not needing a persona anymore to feel comfortable, you know, in these like spaces. And that's me in Australia, and I picked that because I just miss being that skinny. But also, that's another look where I felt like, you know, all of that gold is, I don't even know where I got it all, but I felt like this was a really bold look for me because I was just like, oh my gosh, I feel like really naked. I feel like really exposed, and I feel like really out here, and I love it. Um, but that's just that's my last photograph, and that's just like a small introduction into myself.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Okay. Hey everybody, I'm Eric Mack. I guess in thinking about fashion, fashion has always been really important to me. It's sort of been a way of creating a kind of felt space. I come from a background of painting, and essentially the work is painting for me. These things end up using inherent materialities, materials that are bought, found, and kind of modified into being something that's a new whole, like a kind of rearrangement. Yeah, I mean, this piece in particular is called Two Flags, and it's using the construction of flagpole in relationship to the fabric, and allowing the fabric to sort of move freely, move in a united sense. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's probably more that I want to say about that, but let's just keep it moving. This piece, actually, I've been thinking about Lil' Kim as well, because she was like somebody who, for me, she exuded fashion. So she does still exude fashion. So this piece is called Furry Kangol and Cowboy Boots. So it's like it's a line from a Lil' Kim song, and but I loved it because it felt like it had to do with the given materials a lot that Antonio was talking about, but also allowing for the piece to speak on its own, to speak through its inherent materiality, and that it still would exude a kind of value. It would still exude a kind of energy and its own beauty. So, I mean, this piece is made out of like palm husks that I got from the flower district, and that kind of meeting with like feathers and a moving blanket and acrylic paint. So like that kind of moment of these things colliding and then being able to like organize themselves into an image that's not just merely like painting and a picture experience, but one that is about that ends up announcing itself as something else. That, you know, and so, I mean, there's a few pieces that use the moving blanket, and there's a part of it that has to do with the top stitch quilting that I feel like is a kind of fashion image that like traverses, like, you know, think about like a quilted vest or like, but for me, I mean, as it communicates as a sort of memory material, you know, it communicates in relationship to like artworks, preserving artworks, or like preserving, you know, furniture as you move. And so like it has this like kind of identity about like transience, and for me also like there's always like this like sort of multiple identity that these things have that really, you know, brings me to a certain recognition of its depth. You know, and thinking about like the fact that the blanket is moving as somewhat like a reference to like a kind of emotional movement, that it's soft, that it kind of is expressive based on its own sort of surface. So I mean, there's more of those pieces, but I don't actually know how many I have in this. Oh, there's another moving blanket. So this piece was actually shown at the Studio Museum, and I made it while I was a resident there. So there's a kind of a collision of materials, and then it kind of is organized based off of like a kind of abstract like processing of the material. I often use like like pegboards, like store-bought pegboards, as a way of almost like printing onto the surface. So like it having this like visual communication with the pattern of the moving blanket. So it's a way of really allowing the given to sort of interact with the applied, and that those things will have this collision that would talk about like multiple spaces, we'll talk about surface and create some sense of optical depth. And some of this is also fabric dye. So like really speaking to the absorbed material. And this piece is entitled Oquendo. Oh, actually, this is Avante, and this is Oquendo. And I mean, of course, the name sort of speaks a lot louder than I do, in that like a reference to the missing child in New York, and the way that I sort of deal with abstraction has to do with fragmentation, kind of mending unlike forms, really processing a kind of loss that's inherent with dealing with the fragment as material. And so a lot of what I end up doing, a lot of what I did with this was trying to ground these things in different ways. So this one I feel like is grounded with the jacket and it being sort of ambiguous and kind of open. There's actually there's a coat hanger that the jacket like is sort of attached to or using. And those things are allowed to be open. They're not fixed. They're not sewn together. They kind of are like touching, and that openness I think offers a kind of potential use. Yeah, I mean this one has like also like orange slices, and that's like kind of like way of like throwing off like this plastic aspect of that painting. I feel like could easily have, or like even fashion has a plastic aspect as well. Really thinking about something that would cultivate a kind of residue that would be able to like throw into question some of the plasticity of the acrylic paint, and allowing that there being like this question of the organic, this question of like kind of lived residue, a question of dirt even, as like painting stuff. This piece is called Claudine, and I generally name the pieces last. So, I mean, it kind of, I had this moment when I was watching TV and the movie Claudine came on, and the name stuck with me. The storyline, I mean, the story is about a working woman in the 70s who lives in Harlem, who basically trying to raise her kids, and she falls in love with like a trash man, and is sort of trying to reconcile the relationship along with like the kids that she already has. I mean, I see it as a kind of productive tangent for me, like the titling and how those things can be grounded in the kind of work. But this one, you know, sort of tells its own sort of physical story. You could totally see it at Greater New York. And so, I mean, it again is like this kind of index of marks being made that like distance themselves from the given material, the green cotton, um, and also like there being times where the dots end up like bringing you like a lot closer. So I don't know, yeah. And then the framework, I mean, the sort of the curtain rod ends up being something that's used to like kind of bring the work away from the wall and like allow it to be like, you know, considered in a different framework, maybe perhaps like one that's like far more domestic. Um, yeah. This piece is called Rare Essence, and the parts of it, you know, come from like really different spaces. Like I made a lot of it at Skowhegan when I was there. The first half of it, the plaid, ends up being like this picnic blanket that I bought from Walmart, and just integrating it with like paint and like kind of allowing for this plaid to be like a gridded system that could be mended with this like Islamic blanket, that could be mended to this moving blanket, and then my mom's throw that was on her couch for a long time in the far right. So just allowing like visually for these things to like, for the eye to travel around a little differently, for the cut in the center of the piece to, you know, serve a different kind of utility, for it to be compared with image and abstract form. And this piece is called Palm. And yeah, I mean, again, sort of mending unlike fabrics together and allowing the paint, the conversation of the paint, like to kind of talk about a different kind of wholeness. And this is a piece where I got my sister to be the model in which she's like wearing the piece. So just for that, for the work to like have a kind of a different kind of use, I felt like the piece was kind of changed forever once it like kind of was like interacted with like in that way. It added some clarity to me for me about like some of the ways that the fabric is attached, and you could see like there's fashion magazine pages. I was working at McNally Jackson for a long time, like as a magazine dude. So like I would collect like fashion images, just sort of my own personal archive. And then just as I was processing them, I just sort of threw them into the painting process, and allowed them to be framed by this like sort of this like undulating fabric. And so the next few photographs are from like my first show at Moran Bondurant. And so this piece is like a blanket that basically I use the dots in order to like kind of talk about the image's disintegration. I think you can see it better like in person, but there's some interesting things that happen with the fur-like material and like the acrylic paint that like kind of talks about like kind of opposing surfaces like on at one. And I love the flowers together. I think that there's something really beautifully poetic about the image itself, and just the softness being like so legible and recognizable. They actually call this like material kind of like faux mink, unbelievably. Like, so there's something about like a kind of decadence that's like inherent in like the the blanket, and yeah. But also like just how readily it could be like sort of like I found it on right on 125th at like an interiors store, right next to like a shoe shop. So there's some other images. And this is a painting, fabric collage that I like made out of a pair of pants that I used to wear. I wore them like a couple times, but I figured that they were better used as an art object. And the piece is called Young Americans, because I was really thinking about David Bowie, like in the fall, so before he died. But yeah, it's kind of like mounted to this backboard, and it just is sort of about like this weightlessness and this weighted material, kind of like having this conversation. And like again, sort of grounding the gesture with this like particular location. And this is a piece that I was working on in my studio for a really long time, and I was kind of I was making work inside of it as it was developing, and it's made out of like microfiber blankets and like attached to this tent as a kind of painting stretcher bar, like a three-dimensional painting stretcher bar as I saw it. So it gave me permission to kind of like think about gravity, think about weight, think about the draping, think about how these particular surfaces signified. This piece is called Folds because it's written on it. Yeah. I mean, so I hand stitch a lot of times, and also go in between like the sewing machine. And it's to kind of like situate the overall gesture of the work to be kind of like both manipulated by hand and also the use of like just some of the yeah. And this is like a collaboration I did with my friend Lucinda Trisk, who's like she's a designer, and this is for this magazine called Talk magazine, and it's the cover of the first issue, and we used a lot of like studio surfaces, some pieces that I've actually been working on and developing as painting objects, and sort of mending with just like more like sort of luxurious materials. And it was like, it kind of happened really kind of like a lot of improvisation. There's a lot of really beautiful coincidences like within the palette that I was using and the palette that Lucy was using. So I think it like came out pretty interesting. Like it's at most newsstands, so yeah, it's called Talk magazine. And yeah, so that's it. Thank you.
Hi.
I'm in full screen mode. Hi, I'm Emily. So for me, a lot of my work got started when I encountered this image, which is a Playboy bunny costume from the 1960s, which I found on eBay. And this was in 2007. I was into vintage high heels at the time, and so I would go on eBay and look around, see what I could find, see what I might want to buy. And this this person was selling this costume, and what was actually incredible to me, so there was the whole thing. There was like the puffball tail, there were the stockings, there was like the bodice, there were the ears, but actually what was most spectacular for me was they were also selling with it the ID card of the woman who had actually worn it, and she was just in street clothes, and it was just sort of like, you could sort of imagine her having worn this outfit, but then also there she is just in her street clothes. And so it kind of made me pause for a minute and realize that eBay, as much as it was a place to actually just buy stuff, it could actually also be a place to uncover stories if you looked hard enough. And it wasn't especially easy, but if you looked hard enough, you could find something that people weren't only selling stuff, they weren't only selling clothes, but they were actually selling memories. So I found myself scouring eBay way more into trying to find stories that people were selling or talking about when they were selling something than actually the thing itself. And it prompted me to just think about, like, okay, well, what is it about this? Why does someone feel compelled to share? Is it cathartic? Is it a marketing tool? Are they lonely, like in the middle of wherever, and they just, need to write these stories? What exactly is it? And so I started collecting all the stories that I was finding on eBay when people were selling clothes, and I created this project called Sentimental Value. And so I started it in 2007 after discovering this Playboy bunny costume. I didn't buy the vintage heels. The whole thing was, I didn't need all of that. Too expensive and not my thing. So I started, but I wanted a place to put all of these stories that I was finding. And so I created this website called Sentimental Value. And for me, and so I collected about 600 of these stories. I kind of have, I sort of stopped collecting them around 2014. But for me, these stories were like, if I had to think about, these like dandelions or like flowers like coming through like a sidewalk, cracks in the sidewalk. It's like they just are so, like, someone felt so compelled to share these stories on a platform that actually isn't meant for storytelling at all. That really is just about transactions, financial transactions. And so I actually just wanted to share a couple just to give you context. This is a really early one, and images are pixelated because they're low res, and they're from eBay. And that is the subject heading, or what they listed it as. So this seller says, "My girlfriend bought these for my birthday back in 1995. We broke up shortly thereafter. She was so pissed," many O's in that so pissed that she cut the air bubbles on the back of both shoes with a razor. Needless to say, I haven't worn them much since then. Funny thing is that they're more comfortable with the air bubbles cut than they were before. They have some cushion to the step. I stopped wearing them because I didn't want the guys at school to pick on my sneakers in the breakup. Aside from the air bubbles, they're in great condition." And so, these were all the kind of stories that I was collecting. And then actually at a certain point, and I'm giving you, I could go, like, there's a story about everything. Like, you say like carrot, I can tell you a story. There's like a mob story there. Like, there's a story for everything on eBay connected to something that someone was selling. At a certain point in the process, I think it was around 2010, I was like, well, what would the experience be like to actually start bidding on these objects, and not really bidding on the objects as much as like bidding on the story. And what would it be like to actually start getting something in the mail, buying these things that I had no desire to ever wear, but just that I wanted to actually sort of own the story in a way. So I started doing that in 2010. And this is one of the garments that I bid on, and that's now in my collection, and which I actually started showing in more of a gallery context. I would show the story along with the garment. So this particular pair of jeans, this seller said, "We're selling these men's jeans for our granddaughter, who bought them for a boyfriend that broke up with her before she could give them. All tags are still attached, and you could easily give these as a gift to a guy who would leave you," all caps, "for his pedicurist." True story. Of course, if you are a guy who would leave his girlfriend for his pedicurist, these are for you. So I never get bored collecting these stories. I mean, it's just like I could. It's a way more fun way actually to use eBay, because there's only so much. I'm not buying as much stuff anymore, but I'm still collecting the stories when I can, and then showing them, in galleries along with the stories. So, the other thing that's kind of amazing about it is the way that people talk about their clothing. On a platform like eBay, where they're using they're screaming at you in all caps. They're using emoticons, the grammar. It's kind of like talking to I don't know, someone who just turns to you at the post office and starts some crazy. I don't know. It's but sometimes they're your friend, and so it's fascinating to actually collect the stories, and then also the images that along with the stories tell you a lot about the person, that you can kind of read into those, but that's another conversation. So, but there's just something very anthropological about the whole experience of collecting these stories. And you can, when the economy crashed in 2008, there were a lot of stories of people selling a lot of their clothes because of, they'd lost their jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So from this experience, though, I started thinking about, okay, well, if people are sharing their stories, and I'm not even asking, what happens if I start asking people? I would look at my own closet and I'd see an archive of memories and experiences. I'd look at my closet and I'd be like, oh, every time I'd go on a trip, I'd go to a flea market and bring something back. And so I looked at my closet, and it wasn't really about the brands or, it was just really about oh, well, that was from Portugal, or that was from a road trip I took to California, or what have you. And so I started thinking about well, if I have these stories, do other people have these stories? I started writing my own, quickly realized I was far more interested in what other people had to say. So I created this project called Worn Stories, where I just started asking people to share a story based on a piece of clothing that had some significance to them, some memory, some anecdote, something crazy that happened. And I started collecting these stories. I made a website for the project in 2010. I always knew I wanted it to be a book, but I had no idea how to make a book, and books take forever. So I wanted to actually at least have the opportunity to just start collecting the stories. And so I did, and I got all kinds of stories, and mostly, having nothing to do with it being the it bag that someone's talking about. I mean, some of the stories, this is a shirt, documentary filmmaker who wore this shirt when he got kidnapped in India as part of a jewelry scam, and so he tells a story about that in the book. This is a pair of biker shorts, exercise shorts that Simon Doonan wore in the 80s in LA, around the time when a lot of his friends were getting diagnosed with HIV, and doctors didn't know what to do, and they were suggesting, well, maybe go exercise. And so to fight off the malaise and being depressed about his friends getting sick, he started exercising and would doing aerobics, and would wear these biker shorts. This is a sweatshirt that's part of a collection of garments that this woman, Laura Jane Kenny, keeps from one night stands. So she's got a little collection in the back of her closet from that. Albert Maysles, this is the other kind of thing that I hadn't expected with this project, is that although I knew that, clothing is, looking out to everyone. We all wear clothing. It's not about fashion with a capital F. It's about the stuff we wear every day. And when we walk through the world, our experiences get mapped onto what we're wearing. Our experiences get absorbed into what we're wearing. When it snows out and a bus goes by and splashes on you, or when you lean against a wet paint, column on the train or something like that. or just the smell of perfume, or if you've, the smell of cigarette smoke or something, it all gets absorbed into our clothing. And it's so universal. And so that's why I wanted to ask people questions based on their clothing. And then what I also didn't realize is, that these stories would disappear once the garments disappeared, once you gave them to a thrift store or threw them away or passed them along. If the stories weren't collected, they'd be gone. Or if the person passes away, in this case, like Albert Maysles. This is a story of a Russian peasant coat called a fufaika, which he got when he made his first documentary. And he talks about bringing Mikhail Baryshnikov to his apartment at the Dakota, as one does, and showing it to him. And Mikhail Baryshnikov recognized it and shed a tear, started crying. This is the suit. Piper Kerman is the woman who wrote Orange is the New Black. And this is which is a television show. Probably many of you know. And this is the suit that she wore when she was sentenced. And she had talked to her attorney about what she should wear. And he's like, wear something that the judge will be able to look at you and relate to you. So that's what she wore. And then this is the voice of Siri, Susan Bennett. She's a woman who lives in Atlanta, Georgia. She went on tour with Roy Orbison as his backup singer in the 80s in Australia in a tour bus that they affectionately called the Bitch. And this is the jacket that she wore during that tour. So, just a sense of like the diversity of the stories that came about that I was able to collect through Worn Stories. And from that, I wound up getting a bunch of other projects that came about. One was I had a clothing history blog for the Smithsonian. I would sort of dig through the depths of the internet as I was working on that project. And one of the things I stumbled upon was just on WikiHow. I got obsessed with WikiHow and how on WikiHow there were all these how to dress like a hippie, how to dress like a goth. And I kind of got obsessed with this because I was like, well, when I was growing up, you had to really try. You had to like figure out what music to listen to, and like, I had to drive to Philadelphia to get Doc Martens, and I had to like, I had to work hard to kind of embrace certain subcultures. But wait, you could go onto the web and you could follow these incremental step-by-step instructions, and it was like all the life was kind of like sucked out of kind of embracing certain subcultures or kind of your own sense of who you are, who you want it to be, how you wanted to express yourself through your clothing. So I'd just been thinking about this a lot. A friend of mine was asked to guest curate or guest edit this issue of Dis magazine, and he asked me if I'd do the fashion spread, knowing it would be like the fashion spread. And I was like, okay, that would be fun. I've been thinking a lot about these how to dress likes and what would happen if it was like how to dress like something even more abstract, like a personality type. So that's where I started. I melded how to dress like with Myers-Briggs personality. Like there are 16 Myers-Briggs personality indicators, and I chose the two most popular, the two least popular. And I looked at the descriptions on the Myers-Briggs website, and then I wrote step-by-step instructions inspired by, based off of what I thought, what those descriptions meant, and had non-models come and follow the instructions and get dressed in the styles as these certain personality types. Like, could they embrace those personalities? Could they come out through dress in one way or another? Or could it bring out their personality more effectively? And then from this, I was like, okay, I'm not, there's this whole thing where I just kind of keep making archives and making collections and amassing stuff on the internet and playing with it in kind of different ways. And so I was like, well, I'm still not done with this concept. So what I want to do now is actually scrape WikiHow for every single how to dress like that I can find, and made this website called howtodresslike.com, which is about 1,000 of these. The how to dress like a hippie or a goth, but also like how to dress like Kesha if you're 13 and go to Catholic school, or how to dress like you're an attractive woman, or how to dress like Drake, or how to dress like Kim Kardashian. So, it was this opportunity to create yet another archive and this way of thinking about how people dress these days, and that you can like go on this website and just follow these step-by-step instructions. And and that actually got me thinking, okay, well, if it can be so regimented at this point, and if you can follow these step-by-step instructions, what happens when things backfire? What happens when like your body does things that like you just have no control over, and it affects how you dress? And for example, I was thinking about this, and it was this past summer, and so I was asked to guest edit Good Magazine, and they were doing an issue around dress, and I was like, well, Good is like about social responsibility, and I was like, this is not going to be necessarily about like hemp clothing. I want to do some more fun, interesting things. And so I did this project where the fashion spread was all about sweat stains on clothing. And I just like, what happens when your body just like will not, we try so hard to look such a specific way and to, give off a specific vibe. But like, what happens when like our body is just like, no, like, sorry, you're going to have like a ring around the collar, or you're going to have like armpit stains, or you're going to have, your shirt's going to look sweaty. And so I just wanted to put that together. I think also just because there's this desire for me around clothing to just like have a little bit of a sense of humor with it, because why not embrace the sweat stains? Maybe there's a beauty in them. Maybe we don't need to be embarrassed by them. And that sort of led to the most recent thing, which is I started thinking about, well, what happens when your clothes really just misbehave? What happens when they malfunction? And so I got asked to do this project for Vestoy, which is this art and dress journal. And the theme of the issue was failure. So I put out a call on Craigslist, which is what I'd also done for Worn Stories, for some of the stories I collected. And I asked people when their clothing had ever malfunctioned, sort of like, Janet Jackson, the Super Bowl, or Lenny Kravitz, or whatnot. And I got all kinds of stories from all over the U.S. of people writing to me and telling me when their clothes malfunction. I wrote my own about, which is a whole other story, which I can get into at some other point. But it was just fantastic to see and to collect and to amass from all over. Just put out a call on the internet and see how people respond, and see how they write to you, and see how they communicate with you about clothing and their experience with clothing, and to create yet another collection or archive that I can kind of play with and have fun with in one way or another. So that's that. Thanks.
So if it sounds good to everybody, we have about 20 minutes left. I think maybe Cheryl and I will ask panelists a couple of questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. First of all, thank you all so much. It was really fascinating to listen to everybody. Do you want to start with anything, Cheryl? Do you have anything on your mind?
Yeah, I guess I will, because I took some notes. And one thing that I can't remember whether it was Antonio or Eric that said the phrase "a new whole," and I thought that was really interesting, to make a reference to an idea of wholeness, or a new whole, or a different whole, only on account of nowadays it's much more common and much more popular to talk about fragments and multitasking and being pulled in many different directions. It seems really unfashionable to talk about wholeness. And I just thought, but here it comes, like they're talking about wholeness, and this idea that through these different gestures, whether you're mending things, or bringing together these disparate parts, or returning a phrase that was meant for someone else but is now pointed back at you, or like even Mary's idea of like taking the luxury bag and making it more whole, almost to the extreme, like by making it four-sided, and even like increasing the dimensions, which struck me as a kind of a wholeness. So I don't know if it can. It just struck me because you usually don't think of fashion somehow providing a whole. You think it just struck me really. So can we comment on that?
Well, I didn't say that. So I don't
I
know
think
if
that was,
Yeah, it was
Eric,
me.
that was you.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about it more? Or- I mean, I don't know. I'm more interested. I'm interested in wholeness, of course, but I think that there's I'm also thinking about decadence too. Like that's when you know that there's like it's filled to capacity. You know that there's so much. There's in a lot like your example of Mary's like a full expression. You know, there's something about a fragment that could talk about the time, and that syntax would be like sort of provided in a maybe in multiple ways. I don't know.
I guess it was. I think it was. As we're talking about the fishnet and how, as it disintegrated, you felt more. It felt more together actually because of the way you felt in it. I guess it was that kind of thing, that kind of transformation into a whole. Anyways, not to belabor it.
Well, no, like I have always been someone who sort of thrived on chaos and, spiraling out of control and never really valued anything of like wholeness or stability or like, but in those moments when I am wearing like something that I know is 100% mine, no one else has this, no one else could wear it like this, and no one else has any sort of attachment to this that I do, then yeah, I do feel like pretty together or less fragmented. But I kind of live for like being broken into a million pieces because it feels really like normal and kind of just who's not. The idea of wholeness to me seems like, how did you get there? I'm just really curious because I'm not really trying, but like I would like to know maybe what that feels like. But for right now, I don't know.
I mean, along those lines, fullness and wholeness seem really different, right, in a way. And everybody has invoked luxury in different ways. And I thought, actually, Antonia, something you said that was super interesting. And in a way, maybe we could plumb here, which is everybody can go out and buy these expensive things, but that doesn't mean you have style. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit. You know, this kind of question that everybody's brought up about the accoutrements versus sort of that unnameable thing that you occupy it with, and that does seem to be at the crux of everybody's talks. And it also feels, I don't know, this is maybe where I am right now, but there's a lot of kind of feeling around that. Like I felt like there were a lot of really interesting kind of emotional states kind of gestured to, whether it's loss or it's this idea of inhabiting. I mean, you backed away from saying I can't remember if you said cuntiness or cuntness, but I'd like to.
Cuntness.
I want to talk about that. I want to know what that means.
Well,
I mean, I think I kind of know what it means.
no,
you
yeah.
know what it means.
But I want you to talk about that because I do think that and style seemed very.
I think that well, when I was at Parsons, I had a teacher who told me he was like, "Your girls are just too hard. There's too much attitude. You need to lighten them up." And I was like, I don't really know what that. I was like, I don't know what that means. And he was like, "There's just too much going on." He was like, "The earrings are too big. The hip is popped out too far. Like, they're too big." He was like, "Slim them down. Like make them smaller in some way." And I was like, I don't know how to do it, because um, I just come from a place of like always wanting to be very bold and like very like bright, but not really like tacky or gaudy. And I never thought of myself as that. But he was looking me dead in the face and being like, "You're awful and you don't belong here." And I was like, "Really? That's so weird," because I feel like I'm doing something so different from everyone in this classroom, and why would you not like support that? So, like I've always wait. What was the question?
I just want you to, because when you were, and this is to Cheryl's point, you were sort of saying when you achieve this
Oh,
kind of
cuntness.
cuntness, that's what feels really.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You know when you're feeling like super cunt and you're feeling like my, I'm just saying as a person, like I'm feeling so confident and like not only what I'm wearing, I feel great. I feel like $1,000 salad, which is just, fresh and clean. And it's like, I feel really organic and it's me and I'm my full self. And I'm just like, I'm kind.
I love that.
She does. She does.
I do.
And that's, yeah.
Style. I mean, I want people to talk about what that means. I mean, you were wearing the same outfit.
Well, I mean, I love fishnets. I love mesh. I love all black everything. Everyone's been talking about, Beyonce's performance at the Super Bowl. And she's dressed like a Black Panther, which I think is probably like one of the most iconic fashion moments ever. I was like, is it French or is it militant? I don't know, because I think it could be both at the same time. I think it could be super Creole or it could be very aggressive. But it's a style choice. It's all in how you're mixing it, it's all in how you're wearing it or expressing it. Like I don't think you could put on fishnets to be a hooker, you know? I think it's all in just like how you're how you're styling it or how whatever your like intention is with it.
But I was just gonna say, I mean, just in terms of that, it reminded me of something like in terms of like the given of fashion, like because when you say, oh, there's fishnet, there's mesh, there's a beret, there's leather shorts, like they're these givens, and you could imagine. I mean, for years, it's like Monica Lewinsky just killed the beret for me. I just could not do it. Like it was just not. And even though that's such a, there's no bigger Francophile than maybe you are, but me. But somehow it's like that given of fashion that like what that Mary works with, like, oh, I'm only gonna make the T-shirt if it's not disposable, it's actually always returning. That kind of given that is in fashion that you can style different ways. I always find it so different than when you say take the givens that are like in painting, where people are like, I can't make another painting because it's been done. But no one ever says that about a T-shirt. No one ever says that, like, I can't possibly make another pair of pants. There's no more ideas about pants. None. Whereas everybody gets away with saying that about sculpture. No more ideas. And so I guess that the givenness of it, that you have to style it, So I sort of guess I'm starting to think about painting that way. Like you have to style it. Comments?
I don't think about it as givens. I treat them as codes. So I think we have like this like totem, this pillar of like codes, especially that we work in my studio. And then when I come to a collection, we have our fundamental codes that have to carry through, that kind of have to underline everything that we do. But then it's like the discussion comes in again about, okay, well, if we're going to talk about, let's say if the next collection is gold, like what's the commentary on gold? Is it a fabric? Is it material? Is it a reaction? Is it a retelling of a history? Is it is it very specific just to clothing, or is there more anthropology involved in it? But yeah, you can definitely place those same codes on a fundamental garment, or maybe identifying what that garment's going to be symbolic. Is what is the item that's going to be symbolic of gold, or what's going to be symbolic of clear. So that's the style that we've created based on these codes. And I think for me, style is like if you really want to nail style, it's about like the authenticity of it and the sort of authority to carry it and the attitude. It really is. It's like you can have the same person wearing the big earrings and have a totally different attitude with another person wearing the big earrings. You know, the results are completely different. So that's style for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about like the way that, you know, like a pair of pants or like a shirt would be worn. You know, just like if the pair of pants are too long, you cuff them. You know, and like not everyone cuffs them the same way. Or, so it's like kind of dealing with like a kind of standardization and you know, placing some kind of this like personal touch that ends up being like kind of filled with expression. You know, like a simple like tie. I mean, I love thinking about like oversized T-shirts, like women wearing oversized T-shirts, and a knot at the edge, at the side of it, just as like a point of. I mean, I feel like that's more fashion. I mean, that's more like taking, like dealing with the fabric and like, there's something so filled with like expression. You know what I mean? I don't know. I think that's like pure style. Something can't be worn in the same way. Even the way that, you know, people walk around in clothing, like just like the kind of energy that someone would bring to it. I don't know. I see that as like a kind of expression that comes from the hand also.
I guess that what's fascinating to me when you're thinking about that idea of the given and then the intervention upon a given, you know, that I think that's a perfect example that someone could take a T-shirt and just, you know, even the art of like half tucking it in and draping it, like, but it sort of makes me wonder, like, Emily, do you feel like by collecting the stories, are you intervening on them, or is it like more of just the act of collecting and then sharing them, or do you feel like you're intervening on them in a way with what you do?
Well, I think with worn stories, well, with on the eBay project, I mean, with sentimental value, I am intervening, and in some ways, I feel like I'm like saving them from the junkyard, because I feel like if no one gathers them, they're going to disappear. Those stories are just going to disappear. There's not, I mean, like eventually the eBay posts just become dead links, so those stories are gone. So I think I'm doing some kind of service for at least myself, if no one else. But for worn stories, I think what I'm doing is kind of just shifting people's perspectives a little bit, because I think so many people have that thing in their closet that they just have had for years and they don't really know why, but they know it has some kind of significance to them. And no one has really actually asked them ever, you know, can you articulate why that is? Can you articulate why you hold on to that thing? Can you articulate why that thing has meaning to you? And so that's what I'm trying to do in some ways, and wanting to do that before the clothes disappear and before they're just like, you know, in a thrift store with thousands of other pieces. So, you know, I guess I'm intervening a little bit to capture the story.
It makes me think too about, I mean, you hold on to some of those things because you think, oh yeah, that person I was when I wore those clothes, or that person I could be if I wore those clothes. And I do think the question of self-fashioning and codes also is really interesting, where sometimes too the codes misfire, which I think you've also all spoken to, or you intentionally misfire them into directions that they would not be intended to go. And for me, there's something really interesting about that in terms of sort of redeploying the codes, which I think you're all getting at too, and the question of luxury and how that would ostensibly be kind of class-driven or class class-driven, can be renegotiated in different ways through how luxury gets defined, which I find interesting also. I wonder if we want to open it up for 10 minutes to the group. Can I also, though, just do like a 5-second pitch to all of you to please come to our next panels, because I think that they will be in conversation with this one. So on February 25th at 7 p.m., we're doing a panel called Fold Screen Skin, Contemporary Space and Contemporary Art with Howie Chen, Matt Connors, Jess Fuller, Josh Klein, and Andrew Ross, which I think will be really great. And then on Friday, March 11th, we're doing a screening of Marjorie Keller's Daughters of Chaos, just to really delve into our feminist legacy question with Robert Buck, Alika Cooper, and Daphne Fitzpatrick, and the film scholar P. Adam Sidney. And then on Thursday, April 7th, we're rolling out Cheryl's fashion newest line of outerwear called Extra Layer. And for those of you who are intrigued, it's like all kinds of exponentiality, like jackets and leggings, which means that's what's on them. So, which I think will appeal to some of you potentially. The leggings we think will sell out even though they are print on demand, which means it's impossible.
They can never sell out.
Yeah, so that's what we think. But please come to some of those and let us know if you have questions. With that, can we pass the mic around to folks who might want to ask questions?
I feel like I can talk loud enough, but can you?
That's okay.
Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm shy. I thought of something that all of you touched on, which, like all of you, which is the thing when you have like your favorite T-shirt and you wear it to the point that it's like nearly totally finished garbage, or like your shoes that you're holding together with duct tape. You know, when you're a kid, it's like your favorite, like that thing that you had but you can't replace. But how do you replace it? It's gone. Or like Eric's textiles come from used sources, and worn stories is like the hole in the sweater on the cover of the book, even in the like, it's not just the garment, it's that it's been worn and that it's been broken. Seems like this really important signifier, like the rupture. And of course it's your thing, destroyed dress turns into crop top, the fishnet. And like, I wonder, I guess that it made me feel really excited to think of that, and I wonder how it relates to art and making things, and how when you break something, or it's like maybe like a clear trace or something that you've made on it, and like how does this relate to visual art and to the sort of goal, or like the proof that you've made art or something. Yeah. But if you could speak to that.
I don't even know. I guess when I was thinking about, I love the sense of imperfection, or just like things not being perfect, and I guess I appreciate that in the work that I make, and then when I see other people's work, and I think that there's this I don't know, there's this desire to kind of like have everything just so, and I like I like it being messy. I mean, I was thinking about, I like that sort of fragmented way of engaging with work. So I don't know if that's entirely answering your question, but I like all the holes.
I guess, well, Eric, maybe you can talk about how the point of like the fabrics and the textiles having been used, and like how that's meaningful to the material, like why you choose materials that have had this other life to make.
I mean, because there's certain gestures that are like, I don't know, I think it does have to do with authenticity, and like a lot of times, I mean, it's been really important for me to like sort of pay attention to things around me, pay attention to the way that I use garments, or like the way that my body fits into clothes. I use my painting pants quite often, because I think that there's something about like the kind of incidental like happenings that I end up really like valuing at the end. There's like, you know, evidence of the studio, you know, on the surface ends up being a different kind of record. But I think that that like really is a worn story that like very much relates to the way that people love any kind of garment, really. I love that like, I mean, there's also the part where I feel like the real value or I'm thinking about couture, like in a way that there's so much about the hand labor that goes into it that creates value. You know, like really thinking about embroidery that's been worked over, that embroidery, like beading that's been like touched. I feel like the true, and maybe it goes like invisible, maybe it goes into this standardized form, but the truth comes with the kind of intentionality of the sort of decorative elements that come from the hand. I think that translation, there's something really important for me about that.
Hi. On the flip side, I wonder, everyone's been talking about like super special personal family history items or super luxury or just you being your whole self in your individuality. What do you think of the implications of kind of this next generation being raised on Instagram, everyone looking at each other, everyone reading these how-to things on how to relate to the subculture, and then at the same time the fast fashion that's completely taking over the industry, Zara, Forever 21, like what's going to happen to these stories when it's just people buying things to wear once and throw away, and where there's all these products being made that aren't built to last and aren't built to hold these stories or like let you carry it through your whole self or make art from?
Yeah, well, I know we call them like tops for tonight, where they don't have any other use outside of you just needed a top for tonight. And I think that everybody on Instagram has a boutique where they're not really designing anything, but picking out clothing that they say that you should be wearing. Like it's you know, all the same clothes, but it's beige, it's tan, it's olive green, maroon, you know, but they're just crop tops, long skirts, maxi dresses, blouses. There's no like actual design or anything special about it other than it's in a boutique on Instagram. And I don't think that a lot of things really last very long right now. I don't think people really have those kind of attachments to objects. You know, like if you were to, like 2 years ago, if I were to lose my phone in a cab, then I just didn't have a phone for like 2 or 3 months. It's nothing to like just go out and buy a top for tonight or some or whatever. Almost anything I wear comes from Beacon's Closet because I don't have time to like break in a new pair of shoes or figure out if this shirt's comfortable or if like whatever. So I like the idea of like wearing stuff that's has a little bit of life in it and a little bit of like a story or whatever. Those clothes from like H&M or like Forever 21 are meant to fall apart so that you have to go and buy another one. And then you got to buy another one. And then you got to buy another one. So
I think that I actually would say that there seems to be a fatigue around fast fashion at this point. And so I think that that's happening, and maybe it's that I'm coming from a slightly insular view, but just looking around and also seeing the way that people are responding to stories or to being a little bit more thoughtful about their purchases. I feel like I'm getting a sense of that, where like we had a moment where it was just like insane disposable, and it still is happening. It's not that it, but I think people's mindsets are shifting, and they're also just like, ugh, what am I gonna, I mean, the whole like Marie Kondo thing of like, you know, what brings you joy or whatever, and going through your stuff and like, what do you want to keep? What do you want to hold on to? I mean, there's a reason why I think that has just kind of been incredibly, incredibly popular. I think on the flip side, I am actually really psyched about just the like general democratization of fashion and clothing, and like just when trends dissolve into nothingness. I just find that actually pretty fascinating, where something can like bubble up, you know, it can be like a thing that you just like are seeing everywhere on the street in New York, and then it's just kind of like it's gone, or everyone has it, or you know, you can access, and then it's like you just are sort of, you're left to think about like, well, what else? Not like what's the next thing necessarily, but like what else do I want to do, or like what else is there, or if this can happen so quickly, like what else do I want to engage with then?
And I think also too for me, like I really want to embrace the role of an artist as a picker, like the one who picks, and that it doesn't matter like within any category, you know, you never stop picking. So even if you're in, you know, a really like you know, store that's very cheap, you know, to be able to pick that one thing, you know, or then that thing turns up in you know, a thrift store, or even like in, you know, a big bag of clothes on the sidewalk or something that, you know, you could pick through and find one thing, not even to wear, but just because it has, you know, like you were saying, an amazing color, or that it becomes itself material. Like all that refuse, you know, all that overproduction ends up becoming more material for you then to pick. So it doesn't really, so wherever you're going to be like on that spectrum, I just feel like that it's such a, you know, I was talking about earlier in a conversation with the curatorial team about the idea of being a gleaner and sort of following behind, and sort of all the things that fall off the truck, you know, you're sort of looking for. And it's not like, even within that gleaning, like, it's not like you're just gonna take any old thing. Like, you know what, you sort of have this idea of what you want. So it could be the crappiest thing in the world that no one else would desire, you know, it could all be synthetic t-shirts, but there's gonna be one that's gonna be fabulous, you know, and that's your job, to find it.
Last one, I think Amber up there, if you can pass it back.
I just feel really excited about any opportunity Siri has to self-represent. And I wondered if she came to you or you solicited that jacket. Just any gossip on Siri and that jacket.
Okay, so you want the backstory on Siri? So Siri is like a middle-aged woman in Atlanta, Georgia, who has her own recording studio. And the way that I found out about her, aka Susan Bennett, is that she went to the same college as I went to, and I received somehow the alumni magazine like finds you no matter where you go. They always find you, and then sort of for no. I still don't know why, but I flip through it like whenever I'm like eating a bowl of cereal. It's ridiculous. And happened to come upon this series, Susan Bennett. And just, I mean, the way that I kind of am with all of my stuff is I just kind of like reach out to people. I'm like, hey, you know, I bet their email address is on the internet. I bet I can find it. And I did, and I just emailed her. And then she was lovely, and she had, you know, she not only did she have that coat, but then she sent me photos of like her with like, you know, bandmates. They'd got, a few of them had gotten that kind of coat, and in front of the bitch, the tour bus. And I have those photos. And then she also told me that they came up with, it's the story is in here, that they came up with code words for Roy Orbison. They called him Orby One Kenorby. And like they had this whole like language, and she was great. And but what was very strange is that then she came, a friend of mine randomly was working with her on a project, and she came to New York to do a reading, and she did the reading in the voice of Siri, and I like could not deal because it really, yeah, it's very disconcerting. But she's this wonderfully nice woman, and she does like a lot of like the hold music when the operator will be with you shortly, like, and press 5 for too much, whatever, and also in the airports, she does a lot of those sounds. So she's really sweet. She was also like the first person to like take a photo of the book with like this, her story open to it, and like post it on Facebook and Twitter to her like thousands of followers because she's Siri. So
Because
but
everyone's
good.
always swearing at her.
Yeah.
Amber, do you want to hire Siri for your dolls? Right.
I mean, she seems pretty happy. But like we're not BFFs or anything. But like, with every time I see her, I've seen her a few times now. I've met her husband. Like that was the thing with this book, is I like got to be like buddies with all kinds of people through this. And so yeah, I've met her husband, I've seen her when she comes through New York, and I think she's and for me there was just something about like, well, who do I want to be in this book? Like I wanted like, I tried to get like the inventor of the Super Soaker. I never heard back from him, but like I just wanted like, I don't know, I just wanted like all kinds of people, and she just felt like she was just the right person.
All right, I feel like we could continue, but I also know that in 1 minute the security thing is going to happen, which you'll all hear. So thank you very much.
Thank you.